I don't like this ASMR thing. I don't know what it means, and it seems weird and like inappropriate.
It's very weird, but it's like becoming like a social norm now. Like I saw like a Cheetos commercial where like I forgot what's that guy's name? Goodman is his last name. He's on Roseanne. John Goodman.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was doing like a mock like ASMR like while eating Cheetos or something like that.
It just seems like one of those things that give you an excuse to make an hour-long YouTube video.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, ASMR, and then you just post it and rake in the money.
There's this really funny guy.
No one watches the ads anyway, so.
There's this really funny guy on YouTube that does like reaction videos and he just like watch like really weird things and like he'll react to them. His name is Daz. Look up the channel Daz Games, DAZGAMES.
Yes, after you subscribed and liked our videos on youtube.com/Kinetic
I'm giving you a shout out, Daz, so I expect the same in return at some point.
Is this a friend of yours?
No, he's got like 2 million followers.
All right, Daz recommends Kinetic Camera to all of your followers, whatever it is you do.
But anyway,
does he do something creepy and like
No, he
awful?
just thinks it's hysterical, like, and he doesn't understand what it is. So just look up Daz Games ASMR reactions, and trust me, you'll laugh your butt off. It's hysterical.
All right, I'll take your word for it for now, because today on Camera Academy, starring myself, Nick, and you, Nikolai, from Kinetic Camera. That's at Kinetic.com, everybody. We're going to be talking about white balance
and color temperature.
Yes, which is a very important part of white balance, of course. Many people do not exactly know what white balance is, or nor do they care what white balance is, because it's something that you have to kind of get into your menus to know about and to control.
Once you start using DSLRs and ILCs, you will care what white balance is.
You may have noticed there's white balance options if you've used your smartphone or a point-and-shoot camera.
Yeah, that WB doesn't stand for Warner Brothers.
But most people don't really delve into it. And the reason is because most cameras' auto white balance does a pretty good job.
Yeah, back, when digital cameras were becoming like mainstream, like the white balance was pretty. You had to do if you were any kind of professional, you would have to do a custom white balance every time. Yeah,
but there's a lot more to white balance than just leaving it on automatic, and we will get into that in just a minute. But before we do that, let's just plug ourselves. Again, Kinetic Camera, Kinetic.com is where you go to get all your DSLR, mirrorless, point and shoots, and all the accessories you need for your budding photography lifestyle.
Yep.
And if you want to follow us, of course, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. So just search for Kinetic Camera on all of those things.
And we'll pop up.
And you can get in touch with us. Or if you want to just write to us, we're at social@Kinetic.com, because we're the fledgling social media team over here. We're doing our best.
We try.
So, that's pretty much it for all the plugs. We don't have any advertising or, no sponsors or anything like that. So let's just get right back into the topic. As I said, white balance has a big impact on your shots, and that's basically the color of your shots. If you don't have your white balance right, you'll get what's called color cast in the biz, and you will notice that your pictures are either really reddish or bluish or sometimes green or yellow. It depends on what kind of lighting you have around you. So what kinds of color casts can you get, and what is that a result of? So let's say you have some bluish look on your pictures. Why does that happen?
That's mainly because your white balance is set to what we would call color temperature would be too cool. So you would have to basically match the color of the light around you and make it a little bit warmer.
Right.
And then it's basically in the reverse. If it's showing up too red, that means that your white balance is too warm, and you would have to cool it down and drop your... Am I getting too technical already for this?
No, not really. But I mean, we can talk about why you say cool and warm. Yeah. Because light, much like temperature, is based on a scale. And with light, it's on the Kelvin scale. Mm-hmm. And Kelvin, it's used basically in physical sciences. It's like the standard temperature scale, as opposed to Celsius, which is most often used, and Fahrenheit, which is only used here because we're weird for some reason.
America,
we only use Fahrenheit. Yeah. But anyway, we use Kelvin in photography for measuring the degrees of lighting. Actually, Kelvin is no longer referred to in degrees. I learned this when I was doing my research. They stopped using degrees Kelvin back in the 1950s. It was agreed upon that we would no longer say degrees Kelvin. It's now just kelvins.
Yeah, because everyone thinks, oh, temperature.
Right.
It's too hot.
So anyway, the scale goes from, in lighting, generally from about 1,000, which is like candlelight, which is super, super dim, very warm.
Yeah.
And all the way up to like 9,000, which is like out in the shade. So there's a whole range of color temperatures, starting with the low ones where you have incandescent lighting, which is regular standard light bulbs, which actually are no longer produced.
Really?
In the United States. I think you can still get spotlights with them, but you can't get like household incandescent bulbs anymore.
I was about to say, that means like tungsten's like dead.
Well, tungsten still exists. Halogen still exists because those are specialty lights.
Gotcha.
Right? So you can still get those types of lights to reproduce, say, a 2700 Kelvin color temperature, which is reddish, right? Nice and orange. You get that really warm glow feeling. But you can't get regular household bulbs that have that color temperature. You have to get like LEDs or fluorescents that recreate that color temperature. So anyway, as you go further up the scale, you get fluorescents, which are about 4,000 Kelvin. Then you've got sunlight, which is about 5,200. There's a lot of things out there that you see that are daylight balanced. So if you get lights that say daylight balanced or a flash that says daylight balanced, it's basically at that color temperature, like 52 to 5,500 kelvins. And then you can go to, when it's cloudy outside, your color temperature gets even cooler. And then when you go all the way into the shade where it's really dark outside, but you're still under, a blue sky, you get a really high color temperature, which is about 7,000 to 8,000, something like that.
It's confusing.
So, it is, but
confuses me still.
luckily, as we mentioned before, your camera usually will do a good job of adjusting. It'll detect what kind of lighting you have in any specific scene, and usually you can get some pretty good, accurate representation of what those colors actually are using your automatic white balance.
Yes.
And that's nice because it's something that you don't want to have to worry about when you're already worrying about aperture and ISO and your shutter speed and all this other stuff. You're focusing on trying to compose your shot, and you're trying to keep it from being blurry. You're trying to get a nice sharp photo. The last thing you really want to worry about is the colors, but sometimes your camera can't figure it out, and that's when you have to start learning more about white balance.
Yeah, and there's also a little hack that you can do, and that's basically just shooting raw.
Ooh, we'll get to that later.
Oh, am I jumping ahead again?
You are, but all right, let's talk about it now. If you don't want to worry about your white balance, even though you should, you always want to get your shots done correctly the first time.
And you do post-process work.
And you do post-process. If you want to spend a little money on Lightroom, which we've mentioned in previous podcasts, is only $9.99.
Get it.
So you can do that, and you can just edit your raw files, and you can change the color temperature or the white balance after the fact.
And that is, I don't know if I would call that non-destructive, because it doesn't damage the photo or anything when you change the white balance on that.
Correct. It's non-destructive
But it will
editing.
change the look of the photo and, the highlights and the shadows sometimes. So it can look drastically different from when you originally took the shot.
Yeah, I think a good rule of thumb for any aspect of photography is to try and get it right in camera before you go post-processing.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about how your camera can compensate for different types of lighting. Number one, there's the auto white balance, but then you have a bunch of presets. So how do those work?
The presets basically are predetermined white balance configurations in your camera depending on the scene you're shooting in. Like, you'll notice that there's a symbol of like a cloud in there for a white balance, so that's signifying that it's a cloudy day.
We should mention that you have to go into your menu more than likely to find these
or
things.
there should be a button somewhere on your camera's body physically that says WB or white balance on it that you can press, and it'll bring up that menu.
Generally speaking, that's not on most consumer, like low-end cameras.
It's more along like the higher-end DSLRs and ILCs.
Right, for people who regularly change their white balance.
Yeah.
But so there's presets. There's, like, if you're in a room that's full of incandescent lighting or halogen lights or tungsten lights, what kind of preset would you use there?
You would use a halogen or a tungsten light.
Usually denoted by a little light bulb or something.
Yeah, it'll show you a picture of like an incandescent light or like a regular light bulb, which is for tungsten.
Right.
If you're outside in bright sunlight, there'll be a picture of like the sun. Again, if the sun's covered up by clouds, then that cools off the temperature out a little bit.
Right.
So you have a cloudy setting. Most cameras usually also have a shade setting too if you're like trying to shoot under a tree or something outside.
Mm-hmm. They'll show something like a little house with a shadow coming off of it or something.
Yes, and then there's always the fun and dandy custom white balance.
Now, custom white balance is indicated by something that doesn't really give you any idea that it's white, has anything to do with white balance.
It's like two triangles and a dot.
It's like it doesn't really make any sense. So you'll just have to look for the word custom or manual or something like that. And when you set your custom white balance, basically what you want to do is bring out something that's large enough to fill a large part of your camera's frame that's either white or gray. Like they sell special cards that are at 18% gray,
yes,
which is like a specific level of grayness that kind of gives the camera the best idea of what the wavelengths look like and how it's going to properly interpret the color temperature in the scene at the time. Now it'll measure what'll happen is you use custom, it'll measure that card, it'll measure that white or that gray area, but it will only account for the light that hits that area. So if you have other incident light in the area that's surrounding that might throw your lighting off a little bit, try and get the card in that area as well.
Yeah, so wherever basically you're shooting, you want your custom white balance card or sheet to be, like if you're shooting a model under like a tree or something like that, you want the model to hold that gray card where she's going to be standing, he or she's going to be standing.
Right.
And fill the frame, take the shot. That way the custom white balance is accustomed to right that spot right there. Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I mean, I've used it before, but white balance is really not all that complicated a topic. You just have to be really cognizant of the lighting that is surrounding you and the types of lights that you're using. It's probably a good idea to not mix different types of lights because you're going to have different color temperatures on different parts of your subject, and that can get confusing for when you're doing some post-processing.
Yeah.
Or it just might throw off the look of your photo. If you wanted to have a look like that, by all means.
It can definitely get a little complicated because you definitely have to really figure out where to throw those lights. Like if you're using lights yourself, like you have blue, reds, greens, like, gels and stuff like that, you gotta have to really know where you want to throw that light, what color balance you want on your camera for that, shooting that light, and just like the intensity of it. Because you can get really cool results from it, like very surreal, very things that pop out big time. But it takes a little practice.
But I think when you're using gels, you're throwing specific colors because you want to have a specific color showing up in that area. When you're just shooting with regular lights and all you want is white lighting, getting the color temperature correct or having it consistent among all your lights, I think is really important.
Yeah, like if you're trying to shoot something indoors, but there's like a lot of windows and you can see the outside light, camera will definitely get a little confused trying to figure out which light to compensate for.
Right, and that's when you would dial up one of those presets or figure out which exact color temperature you want by doing a custom white balance, so that way you can have the look that you want without your camera determining it for you.
Yeah, I mean, the best way that I learned how to do it is, well, thankfully for us, we have digital cameras, and you can actually take a test shot, see what it looks like before you start going, crazy with your adjustments. And sometimes it'll be like, all right, custom, the auto white balance is right on the money. It looks great. Sometimes it'll be weird looking, so you'll have to try adjusting it, and you can just try the presets, or again, like you said, you can try your own custom white balance.
One of the things about the main advantages, I think, of using a custom white balance or one of the presets is that your setting is not going to change as you shoot. So when you're doing auto white balance, it's going to adjust every time you take a shot.
Yes.
So if you have something in your frame and it changes a little bit, your camera is going to read the light differently, and it may change the auto white balance based on what's in the frame. And that may work if you're just, taking a few shots here and there. But if you're doing a series of shots you want to have them, you want it to be consistent when you go in to start post-processing, because you want the colors to be the same, especially if you want to copy settings over from one picture to the next when you're doing your workflow in Lightroom or something like that. You definitely want to have everything looking the same. You don't want to have a nice group of warmly lit photos and then just have random blue ones in there.
Yeah.
And that can happen because just something different came into the frame. It can because you had a little bit more brightness on your white or gray subjects that happen to be within the frame. You never know what's going to throw it off.
Yeah, like I said, mainly when it's like it'll mainly happen to you when you're shooting indoors and there's windows around.
Yeah.
It's like if you're not shooting and there's like not a lot of the window showing the outside, your auto white balance will usually do pretty good. But if there's like that one shot where you got like, maybe like a fourth of the pictures catching a window in the back, the camera can get confused and be like, oh, I'm gonna auto white balance for the light outside, and then it's just gonna make your photo look green or just some nasty color, and it drives me crazy.
In my experience, when that happens, it usually white balances for the incandescent lights or the warmer lights that are inside.
Yeah.
But then your subject has this area where they're completely blue. Like it really sort of because what's outside and what's inside is so far apart in terms of color temperature, you get really blue blues and like really yellow yellows, and
nasty
it just
yellows.
looks really
Muddy.
It's not only that, but it looks so unrealistic.
Yeah.
That it just, I don't know, they end up being unusable shots.
Pro tip, when it looks like that, turn it black and white.
There's always that. You can always, and there's so many monochrome settings in Lightroom. It's just so much fun to play with.
Just suck the light out of it and make it a nice, cool-looking black and white.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we've pretty much covered it all when it comes to white balance and color temperature. I mean,
that's really about it.
There's not a whole lot. Just know what lights you're working with. Try to keep them all consistent. If you're working with natural light, try and do it in an area where you're not going to have different types of natural light. And yes, you have something to add?
I should also add that some cameras will have a manual white balance setting.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you have if your camera, and most cameras have live view function now, where you see everything on the back of the LCD, you can just basically scroll through by hundredths the color temperatures and pick the one that you like, the way it looks best as a motorcycle goes by in the background.
But usually that'll be shown by a little K icon or something, right?
Yeah, so it basically stands for Kelvin. You can adjust the Kelvin temperature of it manually. And it's cool because you can just basically see how it changes from color to color. So if you want to get an understanding of how white balance works and the Kelvin scale works, try doing that. Just scroll through, just go to a scene, a certain lighting situation, switch it up, and then you can honestly actually just start memorizing it.
Yep. Or just print out yourself a little cheat sheet. Just go online and Google color temperature, and you can get a nice little sheet that'll give you an idea what types of light sources you should be using, or what types of light sources produce what kind of color temperature. And I think color temperature basically is becoming a more common thing for people to have knowledge about because of all the different lighting options that you have.
Yeah, so many now
just
compared to what they
just
used
at
to
Home
be.
Depot, right?
Oh my God.
Just shopping for light bulbs. You've got they even have little setups where they show you how cool or warm the light is, depending on, and you got to think about what kind of paint you have in that room and how you want it to look, or if you're lighting a bathroom, you want to make sure that it has the right color temperature for when you're doing your makeup and things like that.
So many.
There's a million different options out there because LEDs can produce so many different colors.
You can even control ones with your phone.
You can
change the colors of them.
Those are beyond ridiculous.
I bet you Mike has those.
I bet you he does. Actually, I've got a friend who's got his whole house is wired up with like smart bulbs and smart appliances and all these things. Like he can control whether power strips are turned on during the day so that his appliances don't leach electricity. He knows what's being used by what. It's more than I would need.
Yeah.
I think it would cause, I suffer from enough anxiety. I don't need to know how much electricity my TV is leaching during the day. But anyway, color temperature, white balance, that's it, man.
That's pretty much it.
All right, so thank you for listening, and hopefully these little tips and tricks will help you in your new photography adventures, or if you just needed a little refresher to get a better understanding of color temperature, we were glad to be of service.
Yes.
So, for all of your photography needs, head over to Cometa.com and buy lots of stuff from us, because we're the best.
Yeah.
Right, Nikolai?
And we like to have our jobs.
And free shipping on pretty much anything on the website. So head over to Cometa.com and get whatever you need. And in the meantime, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and
give us suggestions for our next podcast.
Yeah, we'll love to hear from you.
Options now.
Yeah, there's only so many photography topics, but
we covered pretty much all like the major things now.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can just start doing movie spoilers.
Yeah, no.
And then throw a couple
Infinity War.
And then throw up a couple, photography tips in the middle of it.
Yes. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
All right. So thank you for joining us on Camera Academy. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I forgot the tagline.
Oh, no,
until next time, we'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
That was not organic at all.
Control Z.